So now we have a button that does a thing. Not a terribly interesting thing, but it does something. The other part of the homework was to actually make a form and make the form do something. So let's add a form. It will shock you to learn that to make a form in HTML, you use the tag form. I'm going to get rid of my H1 and my paragraph. Heck, I'm going to get rid of this button too. I'm just going to put my H1 and a form. Form. Beautiful. Inside the form, I need a form field. So I will put a text input. Input type equals text. That is the default type, but it's good to be explicit. Type equals text, and I suppose let's put one of those fancy buttons back on there. Cool. My button is going to say something. What did it say? What did I make it say this morning? I don't remember what I made it say. So what's this going to be a list of? Flicks that the Chris's are in? List of movies? Okay. I'll make my button say add flick. It's nice if it says something that actually describes what happens. So we'll make it add a flick. And this should be a submit type button. So let's put type equals submit. Not just a regular old run-of-the-mill button. You may be aware that you can also do input type equals submit and give it a value. I prefer using a button because then you can put anything you want in between the opening and closing tags like images and stuff like that. If you do an input type submit, you're limited to just text in there. So another thing that's worth pointing out is that an input is an empty element. That is, it has no closing tag and thus has no contents. There's no closing input tag. That doesn't even, see, it doesn't even let me. Doesn't make any sense. Input is an empty element. Look at that handsome form. Yeah. Very special. So, never mind doing something with what we type in the form. Let's just make something happen when we submit the form, shall we? Now, this is still a button, so we could just grab the button and do something when we click it. But that's not very fun. What would be more fun is to make it also work if we didn't click the button but used the enter key. And it's worth noting the homework did not say when the button is clicked. It said when the form is submitted. So we should be listening for an entirely different kind of event, I say. Instead of listening for a button to be clicked, we should listen for a what to be whatted. Say that again, Logan. Yeah, a form to be submitted, right? Yeah, it's right there highlighted on the screen. I try not to make it too hard, folks. All right. So instead of grabbing the button off the page, I'll grab the form. So I'll name my variable something sensible like form. My selector, we could just put form. If we feel like maybe we're going to have more than one form on the page eventually, we could give it an ID or something like flick form. Sure, why not? I'll call it flick form. And I'll say form hash flick form. And then instead of waiting for something to be clicked, I'll wait for the form to be submitted. And I'll call that same function. And this time I'll just make it do exactly the same thing. Now there is no paragraph named fancy anymore, is there? So I'll change this back to H1. So it's going to do the same thing, but now it's going to do it because I submitted the form, not because I clicked a button. So let's refresh. Let's try clicking the button. That still worked. Oh, And what about if I hit enter? Oh, Let's do this in slow motion. All right, watch carefully. It changed, didn't it? Yeah. All right, it changed. Ship it. All done. Super mega bonus credit. I saw it change. Yeah, that's not ideal. So what can we do about this? Yes, we can do that. But how do we ever know that? Let's have a look at what's going on here. Since we saw it change, but then something bad happened, let's have a look at what's happening inside this function. So I'm going to throw, anybody used breakpoints in when debugging before in any kind of editor? Yeah. What's a breakpoint?
It stops the code at that spot.
Yeah, stops the code at that spot and lets you intervene. Yeah, step by step. Let's do it. JavaScript, just put the word debugger in there. Remember to, yeah. Remember to take this out before you push this to production, for example. That would be very bad. But for right now, just throw the word debugger in there and check it out.
Oh, JavaScript is great now.
Could be worse. All right. So let's submit the form now. Behold, paused in debugger. And over here, we see exactly which line we're on. We see our local variables. What the heck is this? I don't know. My mind can't handle that right now. So also, if I go over to my console right now, I will be writing code as though I were right on line 4. So, are there any arguments passed to this function? We didn't ask for any, did we? There's nothing up here in parentheses. And we didn't even put any parentheses down here. Because we're not the ones who called it, are we? We're not the ones who called update heading. JavaScript called it for us. Did it pass any arguments that we didn't ask for? Let's find out. Wouldn't it be cool if inside a function, you just had a local variable automatically called arguments? Holy smokes. And it gives you an array-like thing, not technically an array, but a very array-like thing called arguments. And I can see, yep, I have arguments square bracket 0. What is that? Arguments square bracket 0. It's an event object. So inside an event handler, that is a function that is run automatically when an event occurs, you are given the actual event that occurred as an argument to that function, whether you ask for it or not. So interesting thing about JavaScript. I'm being polite by using the word interesting. It does not enforce the number of arguments that a function receives. We didn't ask for any, and they passed us one anyway. That's okay. And you're always welcome to not pass in arguments that they are asking for. JavaScript won't enforce that. Now, you could always write your function to enforce that, to check the number of arguments and return an error if the wrong number are passed in. But JavaScript doesn't do it automatically. Some of the built-in functions do, but that's because of the way those functions are written, not because of the design of the JavaScript language. So that's kind of an interesting thing. The number and types of arguments, not enforced at all. So we got this event argument even though we didn't ask for it. So if you're handling an event, it is good to know that there's going to be an event object pass in. So I am going to go ahead and list it in my function signature there. So I'm going to call EV. Use good variable names, good clear variable names. This is one of those cases where I think a really short variable name is acceptable. If you're writing an event handler, everybody knows that that argument's going to be an event, so I think it's totally acceptable to call it EV. That's fairly common. Like, if you're doing a counter inside a for loop, it's fine to call it I. Everyone knows that I means index, and that that's a pretty universal variable name. But don't use super short variable names just to keep things short. Be explicit about what they are. But I think EV is totally acceptable. Cool. So we've got that. What good does that do us? Let's move our debugger a little further down the list. Okay, unpause, hit my little play button here. Let's refresh. Let's submit it again. Here we are. So now I've got heading, and look, it changed, totally changed, heading.text content. But there it goes. So what's happening here anyway? It looks like the page is refreshing. Also looks like the URL is changing just a tiny bit. There's a question mark here that wasn't there before. So what's going on? Turns out certain events in JavaScript have default actions. Clicking a random button on the page does not have a default action. So it'll just do whatever we tell it to do in our event handler and nothing else. Submitting a form does have a default action. In HTML, there's typically an action attribute on forms that tells it the URL to submit to. If that's not there, it'll just submit to itself, submit to the current page. So effectively, it just refreshes the page. If we'd given our input a name here, like name equals flick name, and then did this again. So what's your favorite Chris flick? Rich. What's your favorite Chris flick?
Honestly, don't even know any of these actors.
Do you know any actors named Chris?
Nah, I really don't.
Okay. Kelly.
I don't.
Let's just go with Infinity War. That covers just about all.
Every Chris except for the fake Chris.
Right.
Right.
Which is a big.
It's fine.
Yeah. All right, let's see what happens. It doesn't matter what we type in here because it's going to go away anyway, right? So let's submit this thing. Let's watch it change to click real fast. Oh, do I still have my debugger in there? I do. Let's take it out for just a second. Yeah. I have to type this again. All right. Infinity War. Notice how the URL changed. index.html question mark flick name equals Infinity War. So that's what's going on. It's actually submitting the form to itself. So it's effectively refreshing the page, but anything we typed in the form is getting added to the URL through something called a query string. But we don't want that to happen. This is just the default action that occurs when a form is submitted. So for certain events, there's a default, and we need to stop that from happening. So curse this blasted default. Let's throw a debugger in there and see if there's anything we can do about it. Let's have a closer look. Refresh, blah, blah, blah. All right, so we know now that the event is getting passed in. We've named it EV. Here's our debugger. In my console, I should have a variable called EV. I do. It's this event. It's of type submit. It's got a target property that is the form looks like. Form hash click form. Target. What do you think that is? What do you think the target means? Good guess. On an event object, the target is what the event happened to. So if it had been a button click, the target would be the button. Since it was a form submission, the target is the form. So it's usually this thing. The thing that the submission happened on. The thing that the click happened on. So that's good to know. What else we got here? Default prevented false. That's the whole problem. We want that to be true. So wouldn't it be cool if we could tell it to prevent that default thing from happening? So if you were to write default prevented as a verb, how would you write that? Say that again. Hang on, let me look. No, I'm trying to remember your name. Hold on. Engelbert. No, I don't remember your name at all. Sorry. Oh, yeah. Kieran, right? Yeah, Kieran. All right, cool. I knew that. We go way back. My old buddy Kieran. So, wouldn't it be cool if I could say ev.prevent? Ooh, look at that. Prevent default. And it's a function, right? Yeah, it's a function. Event prevent default. Unpause my debugger, and it didn't change. So, how about the first thing we do inside this event handler is call event.prevent default. Then we'll do this other stuff. Does it work? What's your favorite Chris flick, Jordan? Excellent choice. Not that we did anything with that input, right? But by golly, our form got handled the way we wanted it to. It changed the word. Sweet. So how did this event object get in here again? We didn't pass that in. How'd that happen? That's magic, right? We're not the ones who called update heading, right? We just said, hey, listen for this event to occur and call update heading. And anytime you do that, anytime JavaScript calls your function because an event occurred, it's always going to pass in that event object as the first argument. You can rely on it being there. And you can do things like get the target of the event or prevent the default action of the event. Cool. We did a thing. That was actually part of the homework. So how about we go ahead and commit that? So what we need to do is we need to stage that change, right, by adding it. Then we need to commit that change. Dirty little secret. Visual Studio Code has Git support built right in. See this little icon that looks like a flux capacitor? It's not. That's supposed to be like a Git branch there. See? So click right on that, and I can see the changes since last time. If I click on one of these files, the little plus sign right there, says staged changes. No, that's staged. No, this is stage 2. Haha. If you want to have a look at what those changes were, click on one of these files, and it shows you. It shows you which lines exactly changed. I took these 3 lines out. I added these 3 lines. The red is what's changed. The green, or the red was taken out. The green was added. Very, very nice. So I can take this one out that says index.
So this is only before you commit them?
Right. Right. It'll show you the changes as long as you haven't committed yet. So then you just type your commit message up there. And as far as commit messages go, making them good is kind of a vague directive. Both GitHub and Google have style guides for their commit messages, and I think they're very good, and they're fairly widely adopted now. And that is, write your commit message as an imperative sentence. In other words, like a command. Think of it this way. It should complete the sentence, this commit will. So write them in present tense, not past tense. And write them as complete sentences. I don't put a period at the end, but I do capitalize them. So I want to say what this commit does. So what have I done since the last time I committed? I added the form, right? So this commit will update the heading when a form is submitted. Update the heading when a form is submitted. And then you can hit the little check mark, or you can just hit Command Enter or Control Enter. And it commits it. So now we have it in our history, but it's still just on our laptop, right? We need to push it if we want it on GitHub. So we go ellipsis, menu here, push. Then if I go out and look on GitHub, here we go. I've got 6 commits. The last one was update the heading when a form is submitted. So also notice on GitHub, that's how you get to your commits. Look at your repository, see the tab here that says 6 commits. Check that out. You can see all your previous messages. Click on one of them. Update readme with the project description. Click on that. It'll show you just the files that changed, and it'll highlight what changed. This line was taken out. This line was added. This last commit, we took out these 3 lines of our HTML, added these 4 lines, and we changed these lines of our index.js. So you can always see your previous changes on there. Yeah?
So, like, for example, for homework 1, if you wanted to see, like, what it looked like all 3 files together at that time,
Yeah.
added stuff after it, how would you see that?
So if you want to see what all the files looked like at that time, so if you find update a fancy paragraph, this button right here will actually let you browse the repository at that point in time. So it'll take you to this page. And now if I click on index.js, that would be that entire file as it was at that time, not just highlighting what changed, right? Is that what you meant? Yeah. So if you click that little button next to the commit, it'll take you back to the whole repository at that time, so you can see the entire file. Yeah.
So when you commit with the Visual Studio code, it
Yeah.
also pushes at the same time?
It doesn't do that automatically. After you commit, you need to choose push from this menu. Push. Yep. Right. So I'll be using the Git integration in Visual Studio Code from now on because it is faster. And it's worth pointing out, you can also do add and commit in one step. If you don't manually add any of the files, it'll just commit them all. Cool.